already I was like ripping my sheets. I was like in bed, it was 4 a.m. I read this whole book like a day. Because sometimes I don't have this experience because like it's like 900 pages. But
oh, that is okay.
Take a look, it's in a book, a reading rainbow.
Welcome to Fan Take,
the series where we'll be breaking down different fandoms and their impact on the advertising industry. I'm Mackenzie, I'm the media department manager at the agency.
And I'm Ginny, an operations manager at the agency. And in case you didn't know by now, we're fangirls.
And full disclosure, these mics are fake. But, you know, we just really wanted to live out our full podcast pop star dreams. So that's why we have them. That is the only reason. Anyways, now that we've gotten that out of the way, please welcome our guest for this episode, the book lover, Ella Choi.
Woo! Thank you guys. I'm so happy to be here. If you guys don't know, I am Ella. Like they said, I am the creative department manager at the agency. I'm also a graphic design major. I am a senior, and some of the fandoms I am a part of. Of course, book talk, which is what we're talking about today. I also love anime and the many fandoms in that genre. Marvel, Star Wars. If you guys are watching The Last of Us, definitely a part of that. Play the games, love that. Game of Thrones. I could keep going. There's a lot.
She's a fangirl.
Yeah, we love a fangirl.
So I feel like we have to start off with just like the classic book question. And I need some reading recs, so this is actually very good for me. What books are you currently reading?
This is a hard question because I feel like I'm always reading a lot of books, but at the moment, I think there's 3 main ones. One, How to Kill Your Family by Bella Mackie. It's not, guys,
Wow.
It's not, you know, a how-to guide. It's like a satirical, fictional girl gets wronged and is seeking revenge type book. It's very good. It's very like dry and witty. I love that type of book. I'm also reading a history of graphic design book because gotta educate myself, you know, as a graphic design major. I love reading books like that. I think they're just really cool. And of course, pictures. I love pictures. I love the visuals.
So I'm not the biggest reader. I can't really get myself to like sit down and just read a book. But I have gotten sucked into book talk. I've like seen some of the recommendations. I've read some of the books, like mainly over the summer when I have more time. But what is the appeal of book talk to you? Why do you like it so much? Why do you like books just in general so much?
Another hard question. I feel like the reason that I like reading and books also is kind of the reason that I got into graphic design and art. So when I was a kid, I was so shy. I was such an introvert. I did not have a ton of friends before 5th grade. And what helped me a lot, what I loved doing was reading. Like books were my friends. And I know that sounds really sad, but I just love getting sucked into the world and like seeing all of these, especially like the really powerful, amazing, like badass women that are in books. I loved seeing that as a kid because I was also a big tomboy. Like when the other girls were like playing with the Barbies, I was playing with my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle dolls. Yeah, no, loved that. Had like the Spider-Man Skechers. That was me. I always like wanted to be playing with the boys, so I never felt like I fit in a lot. So I didn't have a ton of friends, and I kind of turned to reading, and that was my first introduction to books, like when I was really young, like 5, 6, and then that carried through all the way throughout my entire life. Obviously, still love reading, still a big book nerd, but that got me into creativity and wanting to do something in the creative industry. So I thought I wanted to be a writer for a really long time. Even going into UF, I was potentially going to be an English major. Very different career path,
yeah.
I know. In another life, I could have been a copywriter at the agency.
Isn't that crazy?
That's
kind of crazy.
Yeah, so that would have been interesting, but I got into photography because books, writing, creative, photography kind of just led me down that road, and eventually photography leads to Photoshop. Photoshop, big thing for designers, and of course you get into all the Adobe stuff in the Adobe suite. So once I got to UF, I met with like my art advisor, and she recommended graphic design. So books really started it all. They started the urge to be in a creative field for me, and that was kind of how I got into book talk. And then of course being Gen Z, I'm chronically on TikTok, so of course I would encounter book talk, and it just kind of like revamped also my love of reading because we don't always have enough time to do that, but it's definitely brought that urge back for me.
That's such like an interesting path to graphic design. Like I would have never guessed that. I would have thought that like you were always super like artsy and creative. I guess you've always been creative, but like the design side of creative. So it's really interesting that it started with like books leading into that. That's really cool.
Yeah, and I would never think that like, because it's obviously words, it's not like pictures, and so I would never think that like it's related to art or graphic design in that way, but I guess I can see, because like you're kind of just using your brain in a creative way, but in a different way. So
I feel like the creative field is very expansive, and to me, I'm like a firm believer that you should not sell your creativity and your soul like completely to, you know, the company. Obviously I chose advertising. So I did sell my soul to the corporate machine a little bit, but writing and even still photography are two things that like I keep for myself that I don't want to monetize and make a commodity. So those are like two things that keep my creativity alive outside of work, because you don't always want to be doing what you're doing as a job outside of that, because it'll burn you out even faster. And advertising is already a field where creatives get hella burnt out.
Yeah.
That's a great point. For sure.
I mean, it's definitely like a form of escapism. We've talked about that, that like it's nice to go home after a long day at the office and just like read a book and escape into it. And so it also works well with going into the advertising industry or any industry that's very hands-on and like go to like have that time to like relax and just read a book and escape this world and go into a different one.
No, it definitely is. And storytelling. Storytelling is a big element of advertising, and you can learn a lot from books on that. I don't know, I've carried that into my advertising career and like coming up with campaign ideas and thinking about how the brand as a whole can like tell the story of an experience.
So we've talked a lot about campaigns on the show because we're advertising majors, or at least communications and art and that kind of stuff. So what have you seen from the books that you love, or any kind of book movie adaptations that really, you know, is so creative in its promotion? What kind of draws your eye to that?
Books are an interesting thing to market and to promote. I think a lot of, you kind of said it already, when a book becomes an adaptation and a movie adaptation, I think that's almost like a round two of publicity for it. Because, I mean, have you guys ever seen a campaign for a book? Probably not.
Oh, not until Book Talk
No,
started.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. So books don't have campaigns in the traditional sense, at least I've never seen. But how many adaptations can we name that have like incredibly popularized a book series? I feel like some of the most famous ones are probably Harry Potter, of course.
Like a huge one.
Game of Thrones, another series I'm a fan of. I think a lot of people could say that's probably the most popular series ever. Whether or not you like season 8 or not, I know that's very controversial. That's what made me start reading Game of Thrones.
I think my brother did the same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty sure he started watching the show and then read the books as the show was going on.
I think a lot of people do that. I know Dune recently came out in 2021. There's been 3 different Dune adaptations. And I'd go on TikTok and I'd see people reading the book and they'd be like, this book is so hard to read. I hate it. Why is everyone reading this? But they were reading it because it was becoming a movie, even though they didn't like it. And it took me a long time to read that book too. It took me a year. It's more of like a idea first book rather than a story and character book first. But yeah, another thing is a lot of people don't realize how many of their favorite IPs are based on books. Like Gossip Girl,
Literally.
Pretty Little Liars. Yeah, they don't realize that that's based on a book. The Summer I Turned Pretty, which came out recently.
Love The Summer I Turned Pretty.
Yeah. Obviously, a book has to have some amount of backing behind it before it gets turned into an adaptation, and I feel like a lot of that is word of mouth. Yeah. Like The Hunger Games, I remember when Catching Fire came out, I think I was 12 or 13. We were on vacation in like Mexico, and by the pool, we were at a little resort, by the pool, every single chair had a copy of Catching Fire on it.
No way.
Yeah. I was like, this is a simulation. Like, this is not real. No, literally. So that was really cool. But yeah, book talk and movie adaptations are definitely, I think, one of the like second waves of pushing a book out there and getting more eyes on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Daisy Jones and the Six, like that TV series is coming out, and a bunch of people are reading the books now. And that one was exciting, and you're getting a second wave of readers because people really loved that book, because Taylor Jenkins Reid is a really popular author right now on Book Talk. But now you're getting a bunch more people reading the book because the TV series came out with Sam Claflin, who's in like every book to movie adaptation ever.
And the Hunger Games.
Yeah, Love Rosie is apparently a book.
Yeah.
Didn't know that. So that's just like just something that's happening like right now, is like that series is coming out as well. So
Yeah. Well, that's what's kind of cool about Book Talk, is there's always something new, because there's, of course, always new adaptations, which means there's always an obsession with a new book.
Yes.
So it's fun to be on. It's fun to see.
So this show's all about fandoms, as you know. But it's interesting for like Book Talk as a fandom, like to see how that would be like other fandoms. Can you talk a little bit about, like, have you seen any similarities between like a Book Talk fandom and bigger fandoms like Star Wars or Harry Styles?
100%. I don't know about Harry Styles, but I have definitely seen similarities between Book Talks and other fandoms. Let me talk about Sarah J. Maas for a minute. We have 2 of her books right here. If you're on Book Talk, there's no chance that you have not heard of ACOTAR. A Court of Thorns and Roses is what that stands for. This book right here. Lovely. Sarah J. Maas. I don't want to say she's controversial, but some people don't like her writing style. Because it's very like, all of the characters are like perfect physically. Not always, emotionally, mentally, definitely not always perfect there, but it's fantasy. So there's like fae, there's magic, there's mystical creatures, there's stuff like that. So everyone's hot. People don't like that. Some people don't like that. Another reason is that some of the, how to explain this? The men in a lot of these books are very like macho, like alpha type thing.
Yeah,
it's very like, I hate this word. It's very like primal, which is disgusting. I know the face you're making. I know. Also, as a queer woman, I don't love that. But I love the characters. Sarah J. Maas, I just love the way that she writes characters. Nothing is ever easy. They're all going through insane struggles, and I love that she makes it so fucking difficult for all of her characters to better themselves, and they just all go through these insane journeys, and they're all like, all of the women in her series are such cool, strong, like empowering women, which of course I love. But how this relates to other series is, I'm gonna have to take it back to the beginning of the Sarah J. Maas journey for me to relate this. Reading her books when I was 12 or 13, I think, because her first book came out in 2012. It was the first book in the Throne of Glass series. And that was the first series she came out with. So I think there were only 2 books out when I started reading her. So I read the first 2. They're good. The first 2 books are kind of like your typical fantasy books. They're easy to read. The story like starts to pick up. The ending of the second book is really good. I think in hindsight you can like kind of see it coming, but when I was 12, I was like, oh my god, no way! Like, this character is like so cool. There's a reveal at the end, and I'm not gonna spoil it.
Because I'm gonna read it.
Yeah. I want you to read it.
I know.
I hope you
I'll
do
read it.
I'm gonna read it.
Y'all.
But I will read it.
Okay. You should read it. But okay, so that reveal happens. The third book, Air of Fire, is one of my favorite books in this series. So the point is that there's a lot. There's like 8 books in the Throne of Glass series. When the
might take back the reading thing.
There's a lot.
That's a lot.
They do also, like Harry Potter, get progressively larger in size.
She's really selling me on this.
I'm sorry. They're so good, Ginny. They're so good. Y'all read them. And like the romance in it is really good. Sarah J. Maas characters never end up with the first person they start with. So,
spoiler.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, no, but sometimes, and I'm not saying always, they might go through many people before they find the right person for them. So you don't know that it's necessarily going to be the second person or the third person. Trying to retract my spoiler.
I'm joking.
So yeah, there's 8 books in the first series, I think. And when that series was wrapping up, she started coming out with her ACOTAR series. There's also, I think, 5 books out in that series right now. And then as that series was wrapping up, she came out with her Crescent City series, which is this one right here. The first one is House of Earth and Blood. She also comes out with new covers all the time, which is kind of cool as a graphic designer to
I
see.
saw that there's a new
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
Is it for Akatar?
I think it's for Throne of Glass.
Because I just
Those
saw
ones.
like a TikTok,
TikTok.
at a bookstore of them being like the new cover.
Mhm.
A book talk.
I see people who go and get a new, like they rebuy the entire series every time a new cover comes out
Wow.
because they just love it and they love collecting it and like they love the physicality of books
That
and
makes
everything.
sense.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's
That's kind of like collecting vinyl.
Yeah, I was gonna say, or like when like Taylor, like she release like a bunch of different types of covers for her CDs or something like that?
Yeah, she did like the clock thing to like
Yeah.
the clock, and then she released on Valentine's Day like a heart-shaped vinyl. So
That's so
people
cute.
bought it. It's like
Yeah,
the same thing.
like
but
special
buying it.
edition.
Yeah.
Yeah. So already another way that book talk can relate to other fandoms. But yeah, it's like anything. You love the author. Some people, they follow the author like you'd follow a musical artist, and you want to collect all of the things that they release. It's like
Yeah.
merch.
Yeah, that's cool.
You want them. You want all of them. But anyways, I'm trying not to get distracted too much by this because I could talk about this all day. I love Sarah J. Maas. But so her books were kind of staggered in their series coming out, and throughout the entire time reading this, keep in mind, reading this from 12 years old. I'm 22. This has been this has been like 10 years in the making. So you'll notice a lot of things that are similar throughout her books. She has a lot of portals going into other worlds. And this entire time throughout the series, you're like, these things seem so similar, but 8 years later, I'm like, okay, this just must be her writing style. She's probably not, like, nothing's gonna happen. Let me tell you.
Tell me.
Let me tell you. In the second book of her series, Crescent City, it's called House of Earth and Blood. That is the second one. Spoiler alert, incoming. So the end of her second book, it's like at the last chapter, one of her characters goes through like this portal, and it's like climax. And then they go through the portal, and she lands like in this grass, and you're like, already, I was like gripping my sheets. I was like in bed, it was 4 a.m. I read this whole book in like a day. Because sometimes, I don't know
I have to read a book in a day. Yeah.
I don't know if other fandoms have this experience, because also that book is like, it's like 900 pages. But
Oh, that is okay.
well, it's like binging a show. Okay, she was on the grass, and immediately you're like, oh my god, she went through a portal. Is it happening? Is it happening? Is it happening? She looks around. She's like, I saw a house. Y'all, they live in a townhouse in this series. They have many houses. Stop. Y'all, I'm so excited. She's like in a house. Someone lands by her. And you're like, oh my god. It's happening. And then the description of the person, so this like the dude that lands by her, a lot of the characters in her books have like wings and stuff. He has like bat wings. She like describes the wings. She's like, oh my god, there was like leathery wings by me. And you're like, confirmed. She has jumped worlds. He takes her to their house. All of the characters from A Court of Thorns and Roses enter the house. She's in this world. She's like, I need help.
The multiverse.
This is what I'm getting at. This is what I'm getting at. It's like Marvel. It's like the 10-year build-up that Marvel had. Sarah J. Maas is my Marvel. The way that I screamed when this like crossover happened in Sarah J. Maas, it was a true fangirl scream. It was like
4 a.m.
It was so high-pitched.
Scream.
But it was just so cool because it's such a build-up. And yeah, that's probably the immediate answer to that question, that very roundabout answer.
No, that's so
But,
cool.
yeah.
I'm so glad you like gave us that full story because that was so exciting. I could feel your excitement through that.
I'm so excited for the next book to come out.
So I talked about this at the beginning when we were talking about like escapism and how it reignited my love for reading, but book talk kind of is what sparked that and gave me a lot of book suggestions. So how do you see that influence in the larger sense, not just on you, but like on bookstores or on people or in conversations with people?
Yeah, I feel like bookstores, maybe from the years of 2014 to I feel like 2018, there was a lot of talk about how there might not be bookstores anymore because there was a huge wave of audiobooks. I don't know if you guys remember watching YouTube when you were like in middle school and kind of like early high school. I swear everything was sponsored by Audible.
Yes, literally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything was sponsored by Audible. People were reading, but they weren't reading in the way that you would go to a bookstore and buy a book and read. So I was terrified. I thought Barnes & Noble was gonna shut down. All these secondhand bookstores were gonna shut down. But with the introduction of Book Talk, now you see all these bookstores kind of taking advantage of the trends that are going on Book Talk. I've seen so many where Barnes & Noble will do the trend where it was like, he's a 10 but, or it's a 10 but. I saw one for Akatar that was like, he's a 10 but he locks you up instead of going to therapy. There's so many like that, and they'll do ones that are like blank eras, and it'll be a little like Book Talk era. They even have sections. They'll have a sign in Barnes & Noble that's like #Book Talk.
Yeah.
That is always the table that I go to because I never know what to read. And I'm like, if people recommend it, then like maybe they have a point or something.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Exactly.
Draws
So
my eye.
I don't know. I think that's definitely brought a lot of Gen Z in particular back into reading in Book Talk because they see these things online and they're like, oh, I want to go get it. I want to go read it because I've heard so much about it. Sometimes the book recommendations aren't good. I know there was Light Lark. That was a series that she promoted it. It was kind of like the same thing that I feel like happened with Unholy by Sam Smith and Kim Petras. She over promoted it and got everyone too hype about it. And then I'm not saying that song is bad or anything, but I think it was more hyped up than what in reality it ended up being, and I think that kind of happened with her book, and everyone was like, this is bad.
Didn't it get a movie deal before it came out as a book?
Yeah, it literally got a movie deal before, which is ridiculous.
Before the book was even finished.
So they wouldn't even know like how it did sales wise.
Yeah,
exactly.
So I've heard like mixed reviews about it.
I've also seen people, they'll do the TikTok trend. I don't know if it's a trend, but I've seen people doing it a decent number of times where they'll describe the story of their book and they're like, guys, let me tell you what happened to me last week. And then it's normally with like more realistic books.
Yes.
They'll describe this whole story and you're like, that's so interesting. Oh my God, I can't believe that happened to you.
Yeah.
And they're like, and that is my book coming out next year. Pre-sale, order now.
And then all of a sudden it's not interesting at all. And you're like, oh, okay.
You're like, oh, that's a book.
Right.
Yeah, that we were talking about that like gets me every time because it's like, get ready with me while I tell you the story of whatever.
Yeah.
And like some of them, especially for like romance books, they're like things that could actually happen, and you're like, and I'm like, whoa, can I live your life? And then it's like, and that's the plot of whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's super. Those, and they get me every time. I almost always then read the book, so it works.
Ella, thank you so much for coming on to Fantake, and thank you so much for watching.
To keep up to date with the series and see who we bring on next, make sure to follow us on all of our social media at the agency at UF.
Thank you guys so much for having me. This has been so much fun. And always remember, get on Book Talk. And if you're going to read anything next, read Song of Achilles or Priory of the Orange Tree. They're both really gay. I love them. And always remember, take a look. It's in a book.
A reading rainbow.